call to order. November 14th, 2013, Indian River County Planning and Zoning Commission. Chuck, could you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to staff. There's a couple corrections in our packet they'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Stan Bowling, Planning Director. There are two changes that staff would request that you all approve to the agenda. The first would be to add an item 3B, as in boy, under items not on consent. And it's an administrative permit use item for Marine Connection, Vero I LLC. The Planning and Zoning Commission members were able to get a report out to you all this afternoon by email, and a hard copy has been made available to you. The reason for that addition, normally we would not add anything that wasn't in the packet. That particular proposal is minor in nature, no special notice requirements. And because of the holiday schedule, since we cannot have and do not have a meeting scheduled 2 weeks from tonight because of Thanksgiving, it would be essentially a month for the applicant to wait, and they really can't wait that long. And there are practices, I think, in the past where the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff have kind of worked with applicants when we have a special holiday schedule. And again, it is a minor item, and staff is prepared to give you a short presentation. So we would like that added under 3B. And then under item planning matter item 6A, consideration of the wireless master plan and wireless regulations. That's a discussion item. There's no need to have it this evening, and the chairman, Sam Zimmerman, was especially interested and is especially interested in that item. So staff would recommend that that simply be postponed to the December meeting so that Mr. Zimmerman can be here, since he has a special interest in that. And so staff would recommend that you all change the agenda to add item 3B and postpone item 6A to the December meeting.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, under discussion, Stan, just for the record, is there any notice required under 3B Vero I LLC?
There is not.
Any posted notice requirement?
No.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next on the agenda, item A, Vero Beach Moose Lodge. Vero Beach Moose Lodge request for administrative permit.
Do we have to approve the minutes?
You know what, I didn't. I apologize. Approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion?
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion prevails 5-0. Next item on the agenda is Vero Beach Moose Lodge. Vero Beach Moose Lodge's request for administrative permit use approval to construct and replace a 120-foot stealth wireless communications tower flagpole configuration located at 226 43rd Avenue. Vero Beach Moose Lodge, the owner. Crown Castle, the agent. Zoning commercial general. Land use designation commercial industrial. This is a quasi-judicial meeting, and the parties in the proceedings are Indian River County and Vero Beach Moose Lodge. And has anybody had any ex parte communications or had any site visits or anything like that?
No.
So everybody feels that they are able to make a clear decision and have not been swayed. Okay. I open the public hearing, and could you please swear in everybody who would like to speak?
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
I'll turn the meeting over to staff.
Thank you, Chairman Brogdano. John McCoy with the planning staff, for the record. This is a request by the Vero Beach Moose Lodge for administrative permit use, and essentially it's a replacement tower. There's an existing 80-foot facility on the site right now, and the proposal is to increase the height of it with a replacement tower to 120 feet. The subject site is zoned general commercial. It is replacing, as I mentioned, a flagpole, so it'll be a completely new flagpole. The compound will be screened, And this is an administrative permit use, which requires the Planning and Zoning Commission consideration and approval. Again, the site plan improvements are relatively narrow in scope. It'll be the equipment compound, the equipment, and the tower itself. The aerial shows the location of the compound in red, and it's on the north side of the building. The compound will actually expand a little bit to the north from the existing compound and allow for more area for equipment enclosure. And this kind of gives you a closer view of where the facility is in relation to the building and the adjacent properties. And you can see many of the adjacent properties to the east and to the west across 43rd Avenue are zoned residential. This is a site plan, and again, the improvements are fairly modest from the standpoint of a site plan in the plan view. It's the equipment enclosure, the equipment generator, and the tower itself. It will be completely screened by landscaping. This is an elevation of the tower, and it does provide, as is one of the conditions, for 4 users or 4 slots. And one provider may take more than 1 slot, but essentially the requirement is that they provide the ability for 4 different users, and this particular design does that. This is an aerial that shows the perspectives that the photo simulations were prepared from, and it's a broader view with the tower being right at this location, and this gives you an idea about the residential areas to the south and east in proximity, and also the west. And as far as photo simulations, there are before and afters that were included in your backup, and there were actually 9 locations that were done for photo simulations, and all those were included in your backup. There were 5 that I've included in the PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to briefly run through those, and those generally run just from the west side of 43rd Avenue are the first several, and then from east, and then the ones that are in closest proximity along this eastern and southeastern curve here. And with that, I'll run through those. This is, again, the existing 80-foot flagpole. This is the proposed increase, and again, this is from the north on the west side of 43rd Avenue looking south. This is directly across the street on 43rd Avenue looking at the Moose Club, and you can see the compound and the Moose Club building. And this is as it will be at 120 feet, so you can see the increase. This is from the east, from the residential area, and you can see that the towers close off the horizon to you in the perspective, so you cannot see it. And with the increase, you can kind of see the top peeking through. This is from the southeast, and the tower's not visible at this point. With the increase in height that will be visible, it'll actually get above the trees on the horizon. And this is from the south looking across the retention pond, and at this point it's not visible, but you can see that the top of it will be just visible from the south looking to the north. With that, staff's finding is that the proposal does meet all the administrative permit criteria for a stealth wireless facility in the general commercial district. And one other item I'd like to mention, this is a replacement. So the existing facility will remain operational while the proposed facility is being built. And we have a condition in our staff report as far as the timing for the changeover and removal of the existing structure, but it is required to be removed within a time frame after the new tower becomes operational. With that, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant the administrative permit use approval with the conditions in the staff report. And those are the 4 users, screening the compound with the landscaping, and the timing for removal of the tower. Thank you.
Are there any questions, commissioners?
I have a question. In the picture of the flagpole as it currently is there a reason that no flag appeared on the pole?
There's not to my knowledge, other than there wasn't a flag flying the particular day that those photos were taken, but I do not know.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening. Laura Lee Westing on behalf of Crown Castle and AT&T. 800 Tarpon Woods Boulevard, Palm Harbor, Florida, 34685, and I have been sworn. I have with me tonight Mary Guy, who's the Director of Real Estate and Zoning for Crown Castle, and I have with me Sharon Dingus, who is a 25-year AT&T radio frequency engineer. But I do have a presentation, but we agree with staff. We agree with the conditions. I will compliment your staff. Your staff asked for a lot of photo simulations, asked for a lot of information, put us through our paces, made sure that we had our ducks in a row. And from somebody who does this all over the state and a little bit up in Georgia, we don't mind that. We don't mind it. So I'm happy to give a little more of a presentation, but with that, we do agree with the conditions, and we're here for any questions you may have.
Well, would you like to go through your presentation, or do you guys have any questions you'd like to ask beforehand? No? The floor is yours.
I would simply ask for your approval, please,
Okay?
unless
Thank you.
you'll have any questions of us.
Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Okay. Public hearing is closed. Okay. Anyone has no other questions of staff or anyone? Okay. And I just guess I want to make sure with the clerk, all documents and tangible evidence, if any have been omitted into evidence, are in the hands of the clerk. Okay, great. Well, can I get a motion?
I move that we approve staff's recommendations as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next is a public hearing, consideration of amendment to the Land Development Regulations, Section 915.20.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we did add item 3B,
Would
which
you
is not
okay,
on the
like to go
printed
next?
agenda.
Not a problem, sir. I'll
And-
give it to that one next.
I think Mr. McCoy is ready to present that.
My pleasure. Okay. Vero I LLC's request for administrative permit, use of approval for boat sales and rental business to be known as Marine Connection. And I'll hand it over to staff.
Thank you, Chairman Brogdano. John McCoy with the planning staff, and this is a request for administrative permit use for a boat sales and rental under the name of Marine Connection. And it is an administrative permit use, which does require consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The improvements are relatively modest, and I'll explain that, and they are a staff level type of site plan approval, which is in process, and we're satisfied that they do meet the administrative permit criteria. The subject site is located on the east side of US 1. The very closest north cross street is 15th Place with Siffords Exxon. This was a vacant piece of property that was recently developed as an auto zone, the subject site, and general commercial south of the subject site. By and large, commercial property all around, with the exception of sort of south and east, is a RM10 residential multifamily zone parcel. And there is a separation distance requirement which the site plan addresses from the corner of that parcel to the subjects, or to the actual boat storage use on the subject site. The aerial shows the site not quite how it is, because if you would picture an auto zone here, just north of it, which is the new auto zone, the subject site, and then to the south, Bona's, which has become 14 Ribs, is just to the south of the subject site, and Poinsettia Grove's across the street. So there are a variety of commercial uses in the area. The applicant's site plan is included in your packet and is laid out as such. And it is a redevelopment of the site. This used to be a Suzuki dealership, car dealership, and it's being converted to an a boat sales and facility for new and used boats. So the crosshatched area you see is the area for boat storage. You see the parking. There's some additional landscaping that's going to be added up front to essentially meet our compatible properties corridor overlay criteria. And the applicant will also be providing a vehicular interconnection with the auto zone to the north, and that's why you see this fence line set back and you see no no storage area along that north property line. It's more internal to the property. All the boat storage and parking will occur on paved surfaces, and that's one of the attributes of this site, having been a car dealership, is that there's a significant amount of pavement on the site, and there will only be boats for sale or rent stored on the site. With that, I would like to get to the recommendation, and staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant administrative permit use approval with the one condition that the site be continued to be operate consistent with the administrative permit use criteria. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, will the boat storage be multi-level? Will the boats be stacked on top of one another?
Right now, the proposal's at-grade parking only.
Okay.
Any other questions? Would the applicant like to come forward? Okay. Close the public hearing. Could I get a motion, please? I'm sorry. Bill?
No.
Okay. Can I get a motion, please?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? The ayes have it, 5-0. It's approved. Next item will be the consideration of amendment to the Land Development Regulation, Section 915.20, to allow drive-through and drive-up facilities in mixed-use plan developments. Applicant attorney, Bruce Barquette. And I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the first of 3 land development regulation amendments. Each of those amendments is going through the same process. It's before you tonight as a public hearing. It's been advertised, and you all will make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to approve with changes, or deny, recommend denial. But the Board of County Commissioners will hold a public hearing. Tentatively, we're looking at December 10th for that, and your recommendation will be reported to them. The very first public hearing is an amendment request from a private citizen, developer, and the second 2 are actually county initiated. But I'll be presenting this first one, which deals with the county's mixed-use criteria for mixed-use plan developments. Specifically, the amendment, if adopted, would allow restaurants with drive-through facilities. A little bit of background. In 2010, the county adopted a land use policy for mixed-use plant developments, and that allows residential and commercial development mixed and integrated on certain sites that qualify for a mixed-use plan development in residentially designated areas. And even though those policies were very specific, they still required implementing land development regulations, and in 2012, land development regulations were adopted. And then earlier this year, in 2013, those regulations were amended to allow a limited amount of upfront commercial development. And as a result of that, actually, we've had a number of applications at least start the process for approval. And one of the applicants has actually come in and filed this request for a land development regulation amendment. Now, the current code limits drive-through facilities and mixed-use projects to banks and pharmacies, but specifically prohibits those for restaurants. And the idea behind that prohibition that's currently in the code was to avoid what's becoming a typical fast food design, where drive-throughs dominate and surround on 3 sides, in some cases all sides of a building, and make pedestrian access to the building very difficult, and would make it difficult to integrate that type of commercial design with residential. And again, the applicant of an LDR, of this LDR amendment, wants to have a restaurant with drive-through, and has proposed and actually coordinated quite a bit with staff to come up with special criteria that would allow a drive-through facility with a restaurant if certain type of design and location criteria are accommodated. In staff's report, we'd mentioned one local example where a drive-through facility would work well in a mixed-use PD, and this is on State Road 60 between 43rd Avenue and 58th Avenue on the south side, the Sonny's restaurant. Just to show you an example here, from State Road 16, this is an aerial view looking from the north to the south. The typical parking lot and sidewalk up front along the front of the building, and parking areas in the back. There is a drive-through facility that is not visible from State Road 60, and it is a full drive-through facility with an order board and so forth that goes along two sides of the building itself, along the south side, along the back, the rear, and then along the side here. And the way that the Sunnies designed this, and again, this was actually approved through plan development process, so there was good design control, and Sunnies worked with staff on this. It's easy to get from the parking areas to actually get to the building. The sidewalk here, which gives good access from the back parking, actually crosses the drive-through at a queuing area where you don't have to go between cars to get from the parking area into the building. And again, it's screened well. Looking at this same site from the east, again, State Road 60 over here to the right and the rear of the property over to the left, you can see a little bit more of that drive-through facility along the back of the establishment and then along the side. This location of this queue is a long distance from the closest residential, which is further to the left here, to the south. So it's well placed in terms of compatibility. You can also see, just for fun maybe if you're a planner, for our corridor requirements, how some of the rooftop equipment was screened. Sunny's done a good job with that. You can see these screen walls, but from here you can see the equipment in Kent from ground level, and what looks like a chimney up front, maybe, unless you really look closely at it, it's a fake chimney, but it does hide the venting that you normally get and have to have with restaurant hood systems. So again, meeting the corridor criteria there. But this was a local example, design-based, that shows that there are restaurants that can have drive-through facilities that don't completely dominate the building. So based on that, there are criteria that are proposed with the change, 6 of them. One is to locate the drive-through away from residential so that any noise from an order board, outdoor speakers, or from idling cars does not create a nuisance. To limit the drive-through to two sides of a building, to articulate pedestrian routes to the building so it's easy for people that are coming from nearby residential to go to the restaurant and go back home essentially, and you don't have to walk between cars and such doing that. To visually screen the drive-throughs from public roads and major driveways, and then 2 criteria to minimize noise impacts and outdoor lighting impacts on residential. Oftentimes, drive-through facilities can be open later than the restaurant itself and need special lighting for security, but we want to make sure that outdoor lighting is shielded so it doesn't become a nuisance at night. With those criteria, staff is comfortable that certain types of restaurants, based on design, can work in mixed use. And again, I want to just remind you all that mixed use projects must go through the plan development process. So at public hearing, you all, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then the Board of County Commissioners would actually look at the design specifically before approving it. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the board approve the LDR amendment with the special criteria proposed. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have, and I know that the applicant is here as well.
Any questions?
Yes. How far does the residential have to be from the drive-through?
Right. Good question. We don't propose a particular distance. We think it might depend on the type of residential and buffering that may be between the two. So it would be design-based. It would actually be on specific project by project to take a look at exactly where the residential buildings are.
And with these changes, will staff continue to work with individual projects at the same level you worked with Sunny's to guarantee a project that is acceptable to everyone?
Yes, and again, Sunny's went through the same process that's required in mixed use through the plan development, and staff takes design pretty seriously, and we would certainly do that in those cases.
So I assume you view Sunny's as a success
Yes.
Story. Have there
Yes.
been any failures?
There would be, well, there are certainly fast food restaurant designs out there that don't go through the plan development process and don't have the special criteria, and I would say it's difficult to get from even the parking areas that serve the buildings without having to cross drive-throughs and to get between cars and be looking out for it. And that's because certain fast food restaurants now have 70% or more of their business is drive-through, so they're drive-through centric now, and you can see that at certain restaurants. Again, we would have controls through the plan development process and these criteria for mixed-use projects. I would say there are fast food restaurants that fail to accommodate pedestrians, but that's their choice and that's their right as a permitted use in those situations.
So prior to this, it was pharmacies and banks?
That's correct.
And when a bank or a pharmacy go in for development, do you have a lot of control over that, or?
Well, what we tend to see there, first of all, they don't have the volume. They don't tend to have, order boards and that sort of thing. It's really a pickup facility rather than a drive-through and order situation. So we didn't see any problems and haven't experienced any with that, which is why it's allowed. But remember, even the pharmacy and bank, it will have to go through the PD process for mixed use. So if there are any design concerns, they'll come up, even though they're allowed, they have to go through the plan development process.
Any further questions? Would the applicant like to come forward?
Kind of hate to disrupt the flow, so I'll just, no.
Okay. Anybody else like to speak on this matter?
It's a public hearing, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you opened the public hearing or not.
I believe I do. I'll open up the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak? Okay, no? Public hearing is closed. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 5-0. Okay. Next on the agenda, consideration of amendments to the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 911, Zoning, Chapter 912, Single Family Development, Chapter 974, Noise and Vibration Control, to regulate the location and sound mitigation of outdoor mechanical equipment in planned developments and small lot subdivisions with reduced yard setbacks to minimize potential noise disturbances to adjacent properties. This was county initiated and it's legislative, and I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Roland DeBlois, Chief of County Environmental Planning and Code Enforcement. As indicated, this is a proposed amendment that staff initiated to regulate the location and sound mitigation of outdoor mechanical equipment, particularly in developments with reduced yard setbacks. And I do have a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Just some background. This action got instigated through a couple of public discussion items before the County Commission back in July and September. It relates to a pool heater noise violation code enforcement case in Millstone Landing, which is a planned development with reduced setbacks. The pool heater was located within a side yard setback, as I mentioned, with reduced setbacks with a 5-foot minimum. The question that came up as a result of the pool heater case and dispute between neighbors as to the noise at the commission meetings is whether or not the county should consider changing its noise ordinance to increase the decibel level thresholds within our noise ordinance, or should it look at other solutions such as requiring a sound barrier in this particular case. After discussions and research and input at the two meetings, the conclusion was, and I'll go into the research a little bit more later on, but the conclusion was the decibel threshold should not be changed, but instead the county should look at developing procedures to minimize noise impacts of mechanical equipment in developments with reduced yard setbacks, and that's what this proposal is all about. As I mentioned, when I went to the County Commission, staff did do some research and analysis. We looked at essentially 3 different areas. First thing we did, working with building staff, was a sampling of decibel levels of AC units that are commonly installed in the county to see what the general decibel levels were. A second area of research was comparing our county regulations to other jurisdictions, both locally, regionally, and elsewhere. And the other thing we looked at was the site-specific characteristics of this particular code case and how that factored into a potential countywide application. Starting off with the sampling of the AC units typically installed in the county, staff made a couple of findings. First was, what was found was that AC units are generally in compliance with the county's current residential decibel thresholds, and that would be in standard subdivisions so to speak, with side yard setbacks, which are typically 10 or 15 feet. The other thing we noted was decibel levels tended to drop between 0.5 and 1 decibel each foot from the noise source, or the, say, the AC unit in this case. The other thing we found was the decibel readings were consistently substantially lower than the actual manufacturer's decibel rating for the units. The other category we looked at again was comparison of our county regulations with other jurisdictions. And what we found was Indian River County's decibel levels, which for residential districts are 60 decibels day, 55 night, consistent with other jurisdictions we looked at. The other thing we noted is that some jurisdictions, for example, Vero Beach and Sebastian as an example, they don't have decibel thresholds for their noise ordinance. They go by what we call qualitative criteria, which is essentially less quantitative, and it's defined just based on a circumstance and whether or not it would be considered a disturbance to someone of reasonable sensitivity. From a county standpoint, we have the opportunity to look at it quantitatively, which is a more concise approach. The other thing we found is that some jurisdictions required soundproofing of mechanical equipment to eliminate off-site disturbance. And we found 2 jurisdictions in the region, Volusia County and Daytona Beach, where they upfront exempt AC units that meet manufacturer specifications from decibel thresholds. All the other jurisdictions we looked at, which I guess were about a dozen to 15 or so, held mechanical equipment to the decibel thresholds, which is what the county does currently. The third area we looked at were the site-specific characteristics of this particular noise complaint. The respondent, Mr. Fannin, and his pool heater. What we found was the pool heater, because it's in a PD with reduced side yard setbacks, is located about 2.5 feet from the property line, approximately 8 feet from the neighbor's lanai porch area, and about 11 feet from the neighbor's bedroom window. Also, it's located between 2 concrete homes, so there's a reverberation factor. So all those combined made this particular location an issue, kind of a perfect storm, so to speak, to have problems with the noise. There were some efforts taken by the pool heater owner to help reduce the noise, lowering the RPMs, installed a compressor insulator, limited the use at night hours. Still, there were issues in meeting, and it did not meet the county's level thresholds. Incidentally, the case has been resolved because the respondent has agreed to keep it off. He's out of the country. When he comes back, he indicated he would not run it until he does take appropriate mitigation measures, such as installing a sound barrier. So it's currently resolved at this point, but we are still addressing the issue. And using this case as an example, here's an overhead aerial showing approximately the location of the heater in the side yard. You can see it's pretty close proximity between the residences. Here's another view of the pool heater location. Again, with the separation distances, it's pretty close to neighbor's area. And here's a ground view where the arrow is. It's towards the back of the side of the house. What you see in the forefront is the air conditioner, which actually is not a problem, which is located up near the garage non-living areas. The proposed revisions, based on what I've been discussing and what direction we're heading here, we came up with an approach which is really gives 3 alternatives to address mechanical equipment in developments with reduced setbacks. And what it would do would be give these 3 alternatives: to locate the mechanical equipment adjacent to a garage or other non-living area and not located adjacent to an outdoor living area such as a porch or patio. Or the other alternative would be to locate the equipment at least 10 feet from all property lines. Or finally, the third alternative would be to obtain county approval of a quiet, low decibel model unit, or to install county-approved sound barrier or other noise mitigation improvements. So essentially, we're proposing to address, we're trying to keep it narrow to the issue And by doing that, we're looking at reduced yard setbacks with 3 alternatives for compliance as it's proposed. To go along with that proposal restriction, that we would be adding under this proposal a specific exemption under the noise ordinance exemptions, essentially for noises from outdoor mechanical equipment that are properly located and county approved as quiet, or with the sound mitigation improvements county approved. If it meets one of those 3, it would be exempt from the decibel restrictions. What that does is, if, say, they take these measures and they're a couple of decibels off the actual threshold, it still exempts it because they did what they had to do. And the other thing I want to note that's important is the way the sections that this references is worded. This exemption would apply to properly located mechanical equipment in subdivisions with standard setbacks as well, because the opening paragraph to the section it references indicates that if it's properly located next to the building, even if it's not in the reduced yard setback development, it would be exempt. And staff supports that because we virtually over the years have not, if rarely, gotten complaints on mechanical equipment noise. But we had this one case which was somewhat unique, but within reduced yard setbacks, and that's the area we're trying to address. So in the end, that's what we're proposing, and staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the County Commission adopt this amendment. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, for the 3 recommendations that you have made, would any of those or all of those have worked in the Fannin example that you gave?
Yes. As a matter of fact, when he does, in that particular case, when it gets back to the use of that pool heater, the approach that my understanding it will be taken would be the installation of a sound barrier, which would be one of the options. And we'll work with them to make that happen.
Now, is these ordinances now for the future developments, that's going to be up to the developer to follow these when they're building these setbacks like this for
Right, well,
the future?
As part of this, we'll be developing procedures to work with our building department. So when a permit gets pulled for these to be installed, we're going to be looking at this and making sure that they comply. It won't be retroactive to what's existing. Those
Right.
will be considered legal nonconformities, but from henceforward when this is adopted.
So in the case of the example you gave, if this was coming up as a new development, you would have probably had that put in a different location, that heater in a different location?
Again, it would be the homeowner's or builder's option to pick one of the 3 alternatives. If there's, for example, an opportunity just based on site design to locate it 10 feet from the property line, all property lines, then that's all they have to do. If they can't, they just want it next to the, in the side yard, they could buffer it. The other alternative is they could locate it even in a side yard in a reduced setback development next to a non-living area, which is in this actual development, Millstone, for example, the AC units tend to be located next to the garages. They're all the houses tend to have a similar design with the garages to the front, and those have not been a problem. So that's the other option.
Any further questions?
One of her complaints was it was 11 feet from her bedroom. Right? So
Right.
if you had it 10 feet from the property line and her bedroom was there, wouldn't you be closer than you are now?
Well, there's a setback for both yards, so you would add, if you're looking at the 10 feet, it would be 10 feet from the property line and then the additional setback on the neighbor's house. So we think between the 2, it would be enough to add that distance.
Doesn't it also change because these are 2-story houses? You're keeping the sound.
Yeah, I think that was one of the exacerbating aspects of this particular case. And it'd be an opportunity for us to look at it to try to work out the best solution that works for the owner as well as, what the county's code would say. So hopefully we could address that.
So is the pool heater working according to manufacturer's recommendations? Is it just an unusually loud pool heater, or?
It meets in this case, it's not, it meets the normal manufacturer's specifications. It's not I wouldn't consider this particular one a quiet pool heater. From what we could understand, there's opportunities for there to be quieter ones, but in this case, it wasn't the quietest, but it wasn't beyond specifications.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a comment here and add a little bit to what Roland was saying. I think the advantage of the ordinance and the way that it's structured is that at least the builder, the owner will need to think about and choose an option up front, before the building permit is issued. So whether they leave themselves sufficient distance or they've got the right area to do a sound wall or they choose a quieter unit, they have options. We didn't add a layer of review or anything like that. It's going to go through the normal procedures. But at least the issue will be addressed up front. And that was one of the unfortunate things, I think, in the case here. The owner of the unit came in and got the permit, and there was still a noise issue. Here, at least the decisions will be made up front as part of the normal process.
The issue I have with it is everybody did a lot of work to try to figure out where to position these units or sound barriers, et cetera, but did anybody take the time to figure out what the cost was? Do you guys know what the cost is of, say, taking a pool heater and moving it back from where the pool is all the way up to the garage, adding a sound barrier, getting a quieter unit? Do we know what these costs are that we're going to be putting on everybody that does not know these costs are coming?
Yeah, and I think at the commission meeting discussion, one of the members of the Millstone suggested that it cost maybe $500 more to get a quieter unit. This is the one that was in there. As far as the cost for putting in a sound barrier, it depends on what options approached. From a county perspective, staff, we felt that a couple of panels of fence, I forget the type of vinyl fencing, which would have directed it towards the back of the property, towards the lake, would have been sufficient, which wasn't that cost prohibitive. One of the issues, though, we did run into, and the owner's running into, is compliance or homeowners association going along with whatever measures he proposes for the barrier. So actually, by having it in ordinance, I think it'll kind of instigate the associations to have to come to terms with dealing with this issue up front. So that's one of the things
Well, this is supposed to be going forward into new developments. This is not retroactive back to everything we developed previous to this, correct?
Right now, it will apply to, say, a new house in an existing PD.
Correct, I understand. Nothing,
Right, but-
nothing that's old construction, only new construction.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just out of curiosity, how many complaints really do you get annually about noise issues like this?
Specific to mechanical equipment, it's pretty rare. I think we had, I recall, another what had to do with a generator, but essentially, and then one with the air conditioner at a school, which was a bigger scale situation, but it's rare.
And just to me, it just seems like we're going to great lengths for a nominal complaint here. We're adding money to everybody's house over a complaint that happens here and there and that the county could address as they come in, since you only maybe get a couple of them a year. That's just my opinion. Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, I think in your example, you said that this particular case was a perfect storm of the design of those two houses and where things happen to end up. And I like the three options that they've added, and I think that this will put the onus on the developer at the beginning of the project, and I like them.
Anything else? No? I'd like to open up the public hearing. Would anybody like to come forward and speak? Public hearing's closed. Can I get a motion, please?
Well, since I like them, I'll move that we approve staff's recommendations.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Motion passes 4-1. Okay, next item on the agenda, consideration of amendment to subdivision ordinance 913 to allow additional 2-year extension for sidewalk construction in certain active subdivisions platted prior to 2009. This item was county initiated and it's legislative. At this point, I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a county-initiated request that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, and probably an item that the Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't see as much as the board, since it usually deals, this is dealt with at the time of final plat. Generally speaking, subdivision developments construct or bond out sidewalks. In this particular case, we're talking about sidewalks that are internal to a subdivision project. And those are essentially the two options. And then in 2009, the land development regulations were amended to add what's essentially a third option, and that's to have the sidewalks built with home construction. And that would be for the sidewalk segments that are internal to a subdivision that actually are in front of a lot and a house. And the reason why that was added as an option is to avoid tearing up the sidewalks during home construction. And in many cases, either construction access, putting in a driveway, or grades can change, and a sidewalk put in up front oftentimes gets torn up, and that was seen as a waste, and so this other option was added. And just as an example, this is a portion of the Waterway Village subdivision, and this is a 2011 aerial. But just to give you an idea of the different types of internal sidewalks, there really are two. One is sidewalks that are in common areas, and that's what you see along, for instance, Waterway Village Boulevard. There's right-of-way and adjacent landscaping tracks. So there's this roadway actually goes by lots and landscape tracks and the clubhouse itself. So the sidewalks here can be actually put in up front by the developer, and that was the case in Waterway Village. The street trees, the grading was done. There'll be no driveways, no lots directly access across these sidewalks, and the grade is set up front during subdivision construction. So no real issue there. The issue is on the typical streets that do provide direct access to lots, and I'll go up here to the top of this picture. In this particular case, what the developer could do as the homes went in was put in the sidewalk there, and as the homes built out, you get the entire sidewalk segment. And the homes were built out pretty much within a pretty reasonable amount of time in this particular case. And you can see here on this street where sidewalks are actually being constructed with the individual homes being constructed. And the idea being that if the developer can delay putting in the sidewalks up front, and he or she can do this as homes are built, if the homes are built within a reasonable amount of time and the delay is a reasonable amount of time, they can actually get the whole segment in without having to tear any of it up, and then have those segments connect into the common area sidewalks that are more likely to be put in up front. Again, the obligation to build sidewalks at the time of home construction is allowed. However, that obligation must be in the covenants and restrictions of the subdivision. And some subdivisions that were active in 2009 when that option was put in, they're still being developed, but they have too many lot owners, too many lots had already been sold, there are too many lot owners involved for it to be easy or even feasible to change the covenants now. And so there are some developers of certain subdivisions that really could not take advantage of that change in 2009. And those subdivisions are still under a bond out obligations. We've identified 4 of them in our staff report. And the time frame is coming up on them within the next few months where their final extension to build those internal sidewalks in front of future home sites is running out. And they would like a 2-year extension to be able to coincide those remaining sidewalk construction and home construction, as I had described earlier. That requires an amendment to the LDRs, and that's why we're before you all with this request. And in fact, the county attorney's office took this request in this situation to the board recently and obtained the board's authorization to initiate this LDR amendment. Both staff and the board thought it was reasonable in these cases to change the LDRs to allow an extra 2 years. So the proposed amendment will allow 2-year extension. It will apply, as we've identified, 4 active subdivisions. We think that's a reasonable amount of time, and it is a limited set of projects that are really affected really by 2 things. One was the timing of the bonding out option, the construct at the time of home construction option. They couldn't really take advantage of that. And also having to kind of live through the recession that we've gone through, and having slow home construction, really I think it's justified. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the board approve the LDR amendment request. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Don't you think 2 years is a long time for the individuals that live on the street that have no sidewalks, that bought their house believing they were going to have a sidewalk?
Well, it could be, and that's a good point. In fact, that is the trade-off. How long do you let the first residents, for instance, that come in, they don't get the sidewalk, a functional sidewalk segment until it's built out? And that's really the trade-off. That's actually why the county does have an end date that the sidewalk must be in. And we allow right now a 2-year period. This would be an additional 2 years because we think there's a limited set of circumstances. What we also have, and separately, is those sidewalks that are along, say, the main entrance road and along common areas. Those are required to be built up front or to be bonded out with a shorter time frame. So those get done first. And I think what will happen, the practical effect, is that residents of kind of the side streets, you're correct, they won't have a full functioning sidewalk system in front of vacant lots up front. They'll need to walk on segments that are there or walk out in the street, but getting to the entrance roads where the sidewalks are required to be put in up front. And it is a trade-off. But again, I think in kind of weighing it off, they do have options in terms of sidewalk segments along the roadways, the main roadways. And they will get it eventually within a reasonable amount of time. But to have sidewalks fully built out and then tear them up, I think that's really, the board in 2009 and again when they authorized this segment said, we don't really want to force people into that situation. But it is a trade-off. You do have, if you're the first resident in, you're going to have to wait for a full sidewalk system in the subdivision.
For 4 years.
Total 4 years, yes, that's correct.
That's a long time.
Yes. And probably be walking in the street for a
Well, if you
while.
have little kids, it's, becomes an issue.
I
You
understand.
go for a sidewalk, and maybe they could do the one adjacent to each house so they can still get in construction lines or something like that.
Well, I think what we didn't want to try to get into is try to manage exactly the sequence of, which lots get built first and that sort of thing, so.
And this is just the 4 developments that you listed in your report?
Right, those are the ones that we've identified that are in this situation.
How many units are in there that would be waiting?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's probably, for each one of those, it's probably several dozen that would be affected by this. So you could be easily talking about 100 lots total, maybe more than that.
Anything else? I would just like to add, the way this economy's been, you might want to give these guys just a little break to get these sidewalks in. It's a lot of money to do it twice. That's the big problem. They put the sidewalks in. Once they go to build these houses, even if they try to be careful as they can, they're going to break those sidewalks, taking that heavy equipment across there every time.
I realize that, but it also makes the developments look defunct, and it makes them look like they're not going to make it, and it's a...
But that would be the developer's problem, wouldn't it? Because then that'll be his issue of selling lots. He's going to have to make it presentable to those people, and I'll have to explain the issues when they come in. But at this point, I would say that it's a good idea to let them go ahead and go forward and build these sidewalks as they finish the units instead of doing it twice and costing twice as much.
And all 4 of these developments have been around a long time. I mean, they're going through the phases. They survived.
Right, they're not going anywhere else.
Yeah, they survived the
We want to give them
crash.
a little break, and if they come before us again for it, then we'll have a different answer.
Well, maybe you can make it 1 year instead of 2.
I can't do that, only you guys can do that.
Question,
1 year's
Mr.
not much
Chairman.
time.
How much money are we talking about as far as the sidewalk?
How much is concrete per yard?
For a regular, normal-sized
Concrete's in the 80s per yard right now. I don't know how much concrete they're going to need. I would actually have to have the working prints and figure it out. But regardless, that's just money that you're spending twice.
Yeah,
It's
concrete and labor.
Yeah, the concrete and labor twice. You're going to do it on every one twice. I can guarantee you every sidewalk will be broken. You bring a concrete truck in, you bring a fill truck in, now any of those trucks, the trusses, the block, it's all going to break it. I can tell you, I've been through it already.
I
Breaks,
agree.
it breaks the road when you bring them in sometimes at the, right where the road meets the lot. It breaks the road up every time. I know it's going to break those sidewalks up.
I was
know it.
simply trying to get a dollar amount to see what it would be.
Because
That
you're
I
just going
couldn't
to
tell you.
pass it on to the buyer anyway.
Well, why would you want them to pass double cost to the buyer? Why wouldn't you just want them
Well-
to charge them for the one sidewalk, and not 2?
Because their neighbors would have their kids not getting hit by cars.
Have there been any incidents where children have been hit by cars in any of these subdivisions?
I'm not.
Has there been any complaints posted by residents in regards to the sidewalks?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, staff's only observation is, you know, when sidewalks are installed, they tend to get used, and that's when you really get to see, you know, the benefits.
So at this point, we don't really know if there's any complaints or if there's been any accidents or injuries.
Not that I'm aware of.
No. I don't know, I just see it, that it's kind of a bad thing to spend money twice on this. And times are tough enough. These companies stuck around, they're staying with their projects, and a lot of them bailed. You might want to give them this opportunity to fulfill their obligation.
I don't disagree, but it's the buyer that I feel bad for that has to live in a construction bowl without what they should have. I mean, it's great that the main road is sidewalked, but I can't get to it. Or my kid can't ride his bike to it, or whatever.
I don't know, I mean, I live in a subdivision, they don't have any sidewalks, and I take my little girl, she's 4 years old, for a walk almost every day, and she hasn't been hit yet.
That's why she still likes it.
You just gotta watch your children. Well, is there any more comments? No? Okay, I'll open this up to public hearing. Would anybody like to come forward and speak? Public hearing is closed. Could I possibly get a motion?
I'm in agreement with you, and I'll motion that we approve staff's recommendations as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, 5-0. Move on to the next planning matters. Consideration of appointment of the Planning and Zoning Commission member to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Affordable Housing Advisory Committee does need to have a representative from the Planning and Zoning Commission. That committee tends to only meet once every 3 years to evaluate and reevaluate county regulations and policies and impact on affordable housing. And so it makes sense that there's a Planning and Zoning Commission member that serves. The last time they met in 2011, Jens Tripson was still on the Planning and Zoning Commission. He served as the P&Z appointee. We will have a meeting and an evaluation coming up for that committee in 2014. So because we don't have, and Jens is no longer on the Planning and Zoning Commission, we do need you all to appoint one of yourselves as serving on that committee. And again, we would anticipate that there would be one meeting in 2014 for that person.
Okay. Would anybody like to nominate anyone here?
I nominate Maria.
Can I get a second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All against? I'm sorry, Bill? Okay. Oh, okay, okay. Okay, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next on the agenda, we have planning informational packet. Is there anything you'd like to point out?
No, Mr. Chairman, hope you're enjoying the reading. I did want to just mention a couple of things that's happened since your last meeting. The Board of County Commissioners approved the Grand Harbor North request for the small-scale amendment, the rezoning north of the North Relief Canal, and they also approved the reserve plan development on the south side of the North Relief Canal. You all had recommended approval of both, and they acted in accordance with that. And I did also just want to mention that we do plan on having a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the one in December, on December 12th. We'll have a public hearing, we'll have the wireless item, and perhaps a couple of other projects on. So please save that date. And that's all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
And I do apologize, I skipped item 5, Commissioners' Matters. Does any of the commissioners have anything they'd like to bring up today? Okay. Move on to Attorneys' Matters, overview of ethics, conflicts, and the Sunshine Law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oftentimes we have a lot of discussion concerning the Sunshine Law and Open Meetings Law, and I think we sometimes skirt over two of the more important ethical considerations that you as commissioners would run into. First of all, one would be gifts that you may or may not receive. This issue has come up recently before the Board of County Commissioners. And secondly, it would be as to voting conflicts. I'd like to spend about 10 minutes this evening just going over the county code as far as gifts are concerned, and state law as far as gifts are concerned, and voting conflicts under the state statutes. First of all, gifts. If you take a look at the Florida law on gifts, gift is pretty easily identified. It's something given to you without any consideration given in return. It's a present. Everybody has birthdays, everybody has anniversaries, everybody gets gifts. You as commissioners should probably not be receiving gifts from certain people if they are given to you to try and sway your vote. So what is a gift? Let's take a look. A gift of real property. Someone gives you a house or something like that. Very nice, but it's been done. How about the use of property? Hey, go ahead and use my condo. Take the week of my timeshare. Another common gift. Tangible or intangible personal property. Here's a car. Or the use of that property. Go ahead and use my car. Those would all be examples of gifts under the statute. Preferable rate as far as loans, banking, or other financial transactions, that's pretty easy. Forgiveness of a debt, common in campaign loans that are given, are they really true loans or gifts? Transportation, other than that, provided normally. Hey, let me get you my plane and I'll fly you to wherever. That would be a gift. Food or beverage. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, but by and large, they are gifts. Membership dues to country clubs and things like that. Entrance fees, admission fees, tickets to events, performances, or facilities. Football tickets, anyone? No, that's easy. The issue has just come up before the Board of County Commissioners. They were given tickets to a Festival of Light at Disney World. And on the back of the ticket it said, if you can produce a letter from your attorney on county city letterhead that this is an acceptable gift, you're absolutely fine. You can come on in and, it's our gift, our treat to you. However, our code is a little bit more stringent as far as gifts are concerned. Under the state guidelines, anything under $100 is acceptable in certain situations like that. However, our local code, which we're going to address in just a little bit, prohibits those type of gifts. And then we see basically the catch-alls. Professional services. Let me send my plumber over to fix your house, or my electrician. And these have all been done, and they're very, unfortunately, all too common. Or any other similar service or thing having value. Kind of hard to get around those things. Things that are not gifts, honorary, awards, plaques, things like that. Honorable induction to various organization, clubs, honorable degrees that might be given by a university or something like that. Transportation, as far as if the public is using it or a public employee is using it, it's okay to go ahead and ride along with them. That's not considered to be a gift. Or other kind of menial gifts given by other agencies. If you'd receive a gift going to as a result of speaking at a St. John's water meeting, they would give you a tote bag or a small suitcase or something like that. That would be all right. If you take a look at our code is a little bit more stringent. And I offer this, and if you take a look at section 2, it says, the code shall apply to county commissioners and county employees. And then it goes on to define the term person as including commissioners and employees. So I think you would have an argument that you could say, well, the county code is not cut out for planning and zoning commissioners. Maybe somebody would be able to come along and say, well, it says commissioners, you'd still be caught in that dragnet. Maybe not. But these are some pretty broad warning signs that you are headed for trouble. So whether or not you fall into this category, you are headed for trouble if you use your office for private gain, your public office for private gain. Going to a restaurant saying, "Hi, I'm on the board of planning and zoning. I think I should get my meal free, or my family should eat here for free." I'm not suggesting that you should try anything like that, but that would be an example that I would offer for doing that. Obviously, preferential treatment. That wouldn't be a good idea, nor would making a government decision outside the official channels. For example, you would meet with someone, and you would say at that meeting, you know, "I really like your proposal. I'm going to go ahead and vote for it." Obviously, that decision is made outside these chambers where all decisions should be made, and you should refrain from something like that. Preferential treatment. I like your project. You're a local person. I always favor local developers and local builders. Things that you stay away from, or you are headed to trouble if you are going in that direction. If you take a look at 5As, you should not, under 5A, that you shouldn't solicit gifts or other things from people. That's pretty much common sense. As far as the prohibitions, the exceptions to the prohibitions, you can see obviously family. I mean, if family member offers you these things, they're doing it presumably because they like you as a family member, not because of your position on planning and zoning or anything like that. Food and refreshments. This is where our code gets a little bit more stringent. The county code gets a little bit more stringent than state code. When I travel, or when staff travels on county business, we are allowed a certain amount for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I believe it's now $6 for breakfast, $12 for lunch, and $18 for dinner. Under county code, if a commissioner would travel and would accept a gift, and the dinner tab would be $18 or more for their individual meal, they would have to file a report with the clerk and disclose that type of expenditure. You can go on and you can take a look at some of the other exceptions that are there. Again, awards are there. And also the annual holiday party and open houses. So Christmas parties, holiday parties, things like that. A law firm or a development firm that might be opening an office here that would invite everyone to come and see it as an open house. That would be something that you'd be able to attend. As far as anything else is concerned, you can see the rest of the things there that pretty much apply to county employees. Gifts. Any questions or discussion on gifts? Again, good warning signs and good common sense would probably lead you to shy away from some of those things. The other ethical consideration that sometimes we gloss over a little bit would be voting conflicts. This is covered under state statute 112.3143. If you take a look at B, public officer, you are included in these voting conflicts since you are appointed to hold office, even in an advisory matters. So as far as Ms. Calderon was, or I'm sorry, Ms. Calderon was appointed as far as the advisory committee on public housing, you would also be subject to voting conflicts. I don't know how they might come up, but they may. Voting conflicts as far as advisory committees. Here, since you make formal final decisions, you're also seen as an adjudicatory commission as well, so these would definitely apply to you. Relative, the definition of relative: father, mother, daughter, son, husband, wife, brother, sister, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law. Those are the ones that you need to watch out for. if you are going to be voting on any members that would involve those family members to you, red flags should go up. The question that's not decided now, if a member of a public body subject to voting conflicts law would happen to have a same-sex partner that would be married, and then that partner would appear before the board, there is not a set definition on it. It's being discussed because as more states adopt same-sex marriage things, that conflict is not specifically spelled out. So watch for things like that coming in the near future. And then you take a look at the conflict that arises is the special private gain or loss, not only to those defined people, but also business associates. Obviously, if you're in business with someone and a decision comes to you which may or may not inure to the private gain of the relative business association principal, then you should consider a little four-part test. And the four-part test is the new part of this statute. The legislature in 2012 wanted to get tougher with ethics violations and beef up this statute and spell out what they were exactly looking at. So if you take a look at the 1 through 4, the size of the class affected by the vote, the nature of the interests involved, the degree of which the interests of all of the members of the class are affected by the vote, and the degree to which the officer, his or her relative business associate principal, receives a greater benefit or harm when compared to the rest of the members of the class. Best that we show these things by example. Example number one, when Commissioner Lowther was on the Board of County Commissioners, he has a brother that's a firefighter. When the issue of the firefighter's contract came before the board, the question was raised, may he vote on something like that? Our answer after taking a look at 1 through 4 was yes. The size of the class affected by the vote, it was a fairly large class. Was that vote particularly going to his brother's benefit? Not really. It was going to the whole class, or the class as a whole, not to one certain individual. And did that certain individual, as number 4, make out better than all the others? No. They were affected in the same way, treated equally across the board, okay for him to vote. Second example, the Boy Scouts come in before planning and zoning, and they want to build a new structure at Camp Oklawaha, which is up in Roseland, whatever, new meeting hall, whatever it is. One of the members on Planning and Zoning Commission has a double conflict. Not only do they have a son that is a Boy Scout, but they also have a father-in-law that is employed by the Boy Scouts. So we have two issues that may arise here. Let's take a look at number 1, as far as the factors to consider. The size of the class affected by the vote. How many Boy Scouts are there in Indian River County or our district? I would guess there are hundreds, if not thousands. Maybe John might be able to know, I don't know, since his prior involvement with the Boy Scouts, but it'd be a very large class. So I don't think the first factor would prohibit that commission member from voting because his son is a member of a very large class. The nature of the interests involved. Here with building a facility, it does not appear at the onset that the son would benefit greatly from the facility in a monetary way, nor would the father-in-law, who is an employee of the Boy Scouts, unless he would be receiving some strange sort of bonus because this matter would be passed or the building would be built. I don't know. That would be dependent on the facts and circumstances, but it would not appear that there'd be any problems there. Third, the degree to which the interests of all the members are affected by the class. Is everybody being treated fairly across the board? Sure, everybody comes and uses it. It's not being built especially for the son, not being built especially for the father-in-law. this would be a pretty safe one to cross off the list. And then again, the degree to which the officer or the business associate receives a greater benefit or harm. Remember, you can vote nasty and cause harm to competitors and have a conflict as well. Is anybody going to be benefited or be harmed by the Boy Scout example? Probably not. It would be fact extensive and probably fairly rare. In conclusion, what do you do if you think you're conflicted? What should you do? Number one, call us. Call our office, call staff, as far much ahead of time as you possibly can, and ask. It's a very easy process that we go through. If we are stumped by it, there is the Commission on Ethics who has a person on point that addresses these questions as his job. And it's a very good, easy source to use. If we do determine that you do have a conflict, what happens? When the item is mentioned, the conflict is declared by the person that has the conflict. There is a brief one-page document, I believe, that's filled out and filed with the clerk. That's included in the minutes of the meeting. And it's a simple matter where that person then does not vote, and no problems should be encountered after that. So there is your primer on voting conflicts and gifts as well. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions? No questions.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to go over, Stan? Next meeting or anything of that nature?
Again, other than December 12th meeting, which we intend to have, I have no
Okay.
other matters, Mr. Chairman.
All right. This meeting is adjourned.